Mother Ludlam's Hole is a small cave in the sandstone cliff of the Wey Valley at Moor Park near Farnham, Surrey, and it's the subject of a number of local legends. A spring rising in the cave is recorded in the 13th century annals of Waverley Abbey as Ludwell. A monk named Simon is credited with identifying the spring as a suitable water supply for Waverley Abbey in 1218, after the original source had dried up. The cave has long been associated with the legend of Mother Ludlam, who was supposedly a white witch who lived in the cave. The earliest versions of the legend, such as that recorded by John Aubrey in 1673, make no mention of a witch, and it's likely the story was originally associated with fairies. Various versions of the legend have existed. The simplest version is that Mother Ludlam would loan utensils and that a large cauldron was borrowed but not returned. She became enraged, and the borrower, scared by her anger, sought refuge in Frensham Church. The cauldron associated with this legend remains in the church, but it's believed by historians to have been used for brewing church ale in past times. It's made of hammered copper, measuring 3 feet in diameter and 19 inches deep. As recorded in 1937, the legend is that one day the devil in disguise had visited Mother Ludlam and asked to borrow the cauldron she used for mixing her potions. Recognising the devil from his hoof prints in the sand, she refused, so the devil stole the cauldron with the witch in pursuit. Making great leaps, the devil created a series of hills where he touched the ground, these now being the sandstone hills near Churt, known as the Devil's Jumps. The devil dropped the cauldron or kettle on the last of these hills, Kettlebury Hill. Mother Ludlam recovered the cauldron and placed it in Frensham Church, where it would be safe from the devil. Another version, recorded in the 1920s, is that the cauldron could be borrowed by climbing the highest of the Devil's Jumps, known as Stony Jump, and whispering to the fairies who lived there through a hole in the rocky outcrop on the summit. The borrower failed to return it on time, so the fairies condemned the borrower to have the cauldron follow him wherever he went. Distressed by the presence of his pursuer, he sought sanctuary in Frensham Church, where he collapsed and died, leaving the cauldron trapped inside. The main lay of interest in the area is the one linking Sandy Cross Crossroads on the Pilgrim's Way, the junction by Farnham Golf Course, the mysterious Mother Ludlam's Hole Cave, the junction by Waverley Abbey, Waverley Abbey ruins, the first Cistercian abbey in the country, the crossroads at Millbridge, which we were to find once had an ancient stone, the ancient church at Frensham, where the mysterious cauldron is kept. At the junction outside Waverley Abbey, there was a weir under the road, where there was the familiar middle sea sound of rushing water, and it's exactly on the lay. The age of the water channelling is not known. The abbey being closed until 2 o'clock, we made our way to Mother Ludlam's Hole along a very pleasant wooded track. The cave is very spectacular, with its 17th century entrance arch, its trickling stream and mysterious cavernous depths. The ornate gates that close the cave today were not there in 1987. The cave was open. At the entrance and at right angles to it, there are 2 natural-looking fissures which run very deeply into the rock. They are aligned with each other, but are not on the line of the Frensham Lay. The main cave is large, but narrows towards the back to a very narrow passage through which the stream flows. There are three possible origins of the Ludlam name, Chris informed us. One is from Lud, the Saxon king of Ludgate fame. It could also come from a Saxon word for a meeting place, or one meaning loud. The sound of the stream at Waverley Abbey came to mind then. I tend to favour the loud possibility, for the original name was Ludwell, and the derivation of Ludwell in Wiltshire is loud stream. It doesn't seem likely the stream through the cave was ever loud, but it flows into the way near the very loud weir mentioned earlier. After visiting the cave, a small group scaled the hill to reach the much smaller Father Fuchs cave, higher up and completely dry. It too had side alcoves, though these were smaller and looked man-made. The Mithraic temple at Chiddingstone has similar alcoves at the entrance. There is a group of 3 Scots pines above Father Fuchs cave, but Chris Hall told us they had been put there in the 17th century. During this and the following century, many ornamental clumps were placed on hilltops. Chris regards these as red herrings, but I tend to feel there could have been a strong subconscious urge to build them, to remark the leys. There are no Scots pines above the cave today. We proceeded from here to the Millbridge crossroads near Frensham, which the ley passes through. We found a small stone near the fence of a house, a little way down the road, and one of the LEMC members asked the occupier if he knew anything about it. He turned out to be the local Historical Society chairman, and he told us that the stone, broken by gas workers, was not old, but an older one had existed by the crossroads exactly where the ley passed through. It had been removed by the council to make room for some rather ugly bollards. There does seem to be a clump of Scots pines behind it, but it's not on the ley we're following. After a pleasant lunch on Frensham Green, we went to Frensham Church, which, like the well, is dedicated to St Mary. No visual alignment was in evidence, but the bend in the river the ley passes through confirmed the line of it, and the 2 double trees were adjacent, though not quite on it. There is a group of 4 Scots pines in line with the west end of the church. A window of St George and St Michael by the altar was evidence of the church's lay importance. The church was founded in the 13th century. The cauldron we had all come to see was a huge metal bowl about 3 feet in diameter on a separate 3-legged trivet. The writer of the church history, though recounting the legend, says the real purpose of the vessel was to contain ale drunk at church ales in the Middle Ages. There was said to be a mineral spring nearby, but there is no evidence of this today. We then went back to Waverley Abbey and looked around the site. Beautiful on a sunny afternoon, with blue damselflies skimming over the river and forget-me-nots by the water's edge. At this point our group had to leave, as some of us were feeling the effects of the heat. We called in on our member Brenda Spinney in Greyshot on the way back and had a pleasant chat to round off the day. Rob Stevenson then takes up the story. After our joint exploration of Waverley Abbey ruins was completed, it was time to take a peaceful rest in the sunshine. This is a tranquil spot with the River Wey curving placidly round the Abbey meadows. It was now getting on for late afternoon, and the Surrey Earth Mysteries contingent had to take their leave. So we said farewell, and on a final look round, the position of the church high altar was found. Chris Hall, who had researched the area, stayed on to guide us through the evening. The next stop for us, however, was a garden centre refreshment house for a leisurely round of tea and cakes. But it wasn't too long before we were parked on Frensham Common and climbing the sandy slopes to see the tumuli. Standing on the highest gave marvellous views over miles of common, with the vast Frensham Great Pond unmistakable in the valley below. We drove south to our final destination, Stony Jump, one of the Devil's Jumps whose folklore significance has been given. Only after walking some distance was it possible to fully realise the ascent ahead of us. Standing at the bottom of this natural eminence, one could look up and see a great staircase of log foot steps stretching up into the sky. A long but enjoyable climb brought us to the rocky outcrop on its summit. From this craggy eyrie, a splendid panorama was spread before us. We looked for crevices in the rock to contact the fairies through and watched the sun sink closer to the horizon. I think it was about 9 o'clock when we reluctantly started back down. There is a ley that runs along the length of the Devil's Jumps. This goes through a multi-junction on Ockley Common, a crossroads on Hound Down, Kettlebury Hill, the legendary place of the cauldron. Then it runs along the Devil's Jumps. It then goes through a crossroads at Borden Camp, a nearby tumulus, a spot-marked height on a Roman road, Priory Farm, which is the site of Selborne Priory, founded in 1233, and St Mary's Church, Selborne, which was founded in Saxon times and mentioned in the Domesday Book. The present church, with its Norman tower and nave, largely dates from 1180. It's associated with Gilbert White, the naturalist, author of the Natural History and of Antiquities of Selborne, who was curate for many years until his death in 1793, and who is buried here. There is another ley which goes through the Devil's Jumps, and also Frensham Church. This passes through the middle hill of the three, known as Middle Jump. This once supported an observatory built by 19th century British astronomer Richard Christopher Carrington. Stony Jump is the easternmost of the three. Passing over Middle Jump, it then runs to Frensham Church. It also goes through one of the Frensham Common tumuli, where it meets another ley. After this it reaches Odiham Firs, a clump of Scots pines on a hilltop, which is the centre of many leys, one from Woking Mosque and another from Sunbury Cross. Both of these are also centres of many leys. Odiham Firs, a beacon site traditionally used at the time of the Armada, but there's no historical evidence for this. It's a beautiful hilltop, crowned with a ring of Scots pines and a clump of deciduous trees inside it. While we were here, Chris mentioned an interesting theory he'd heard recently, that one reason pines often grow on hilltop beacon sites is that they're deliberately planted there to provide fuel for the beacon. He also mentioned that when he was just starting ley hunting, he drew a large number of lines over this map and noticed that a number converged here. On going to the site, he found this beautiful clump. There do indeed seem to be a number of leys going through Odiham Firs. The first one, going eastward, goes through a crossroads, runs along a mean following stretch of road for about 2 miles, goes through another beacon hill, skirts Caesar's Camp, and goes through a crossroads near Ash, finally going to a lay centre at Stag Hill near Guildford on the University of Surrey campus. Now this centre was found previously and is mentioned in the booklet Campus Lines. Another lay coming southwards comes from across tracks near the Priory at Swallowfield, goes through Hook Church, through Odiham Firs, through Long Sutton Church, which we visited on this trip, through another crossroads, and King John's Hill, East Worldham, and finally to List Church. Another goes through a fort at Sherfield on Loddon, across tracks at Newnham, through Odiham Firs, then to a crossroads at Well. Now this hamlet is the site of Gistard's Well of the Saxon Charter. There's a well at the track junction of the Harroway here, and we visited this on this trip. It continues through across tracks in Alice Holt Forest and continues to Fernhurst Church. Yet another goes through a moat on the Roman road near Chinham, goes through a church at Greywell, through Odiham Firs, and then to Horsedown Common, a prominent hilltop which we visited on this trip. It then continues to a crossroads and stone at Millbridge, which we visited on a previous field trip. Another lay goes through Basing House, comes through Odiham Firs, and through Crondall Church. Now this is on the site of a Saxon church, and it's got folklore interest because it's got ghost and fairy legends. The lay then carries on through Farnham Castle, through Crooksbury Hill and a crossroads nearby, and through Godalming Church.
That's obviously was the reason to come up here. I came up here and discovered it was a beacon hill. But the infuriating thing is that I lost that map later on, and I've never been able to repeat that pattern. Whether there was anything in it, I don't know. Certainly the hill itself is a significant point. Yeah. There is on the ridge at the limit of visibility, there is an Iron Age earthwork, quite a massive one, in this direction, which would certainly be invisible from here if it was open country on the hill over there. Now it's now wooded completely. Well, the more interesting landscape is actually around to the east and the south. So I suppose London is that way. What did you wanted to know? And the eastern boundary is, you can see the hill over there. So the two highest points in the parish are at opposite sides. And this is the ancient Saxon, at least boundary, maybe older than that. And plus the ridgeway, and it's got some high points on it. And this is the ridgeway we'll be going on, the Harroway, the itinerary. That is Horsedown Common, which we'll be a lot closer to later on. And then the skyline here is the next Beacon Hill. Now those of you who came on the field trip about 2 years ago to Caesar's Camp, Caesar's Camp is just beyond that hill. To give you some sort of orientation. Caesar's Camp being an Iron Age hill fort, for those of you who weren't there. There's a lot of indivisibility in this landscape. This is the point I'm drawing out. And so that if only it was clear, there would be a lot more as well. And the other places we walked 2 years ago, further across towards Camberley, would be visible here, with the old trackway and ridgeway paths over there.
So can you show us one of your ley lines that you found on your map?
Well, like I said, I lost the map and I've never been able to repeat it.
Well, the church tower down there, where do we line up beyond it?
With the pylon? That is Odiham Parish Church and the original Saxon church of the parish.
13th century Long Sutton Church is on one of the Odiham Firs leys and aligns with Hook and List churches. In the road close by are two ancient sarsen stones, said by local historians to be Saxon boundary stones. The ancient Harrow Way ran through Long Sutton, and the first settlement probably owes its origin to this. The oldest windows in the church are two narrow 13th century lancets at the east end, and the narrow lancet at the east end of the north wall of the nave. The four massive oak pillars supporting the 15th century bell tower form a striking feature in the body of the church. The font is probably as old as the church and maybe even older. It's typical of the plain early stone fonts that are common in Hampshire village churches. The hamlet of Well is at the site of Gistard's Well of the Saxon Charter. This well is at the track junction of the Harrowway and the Morthway. It then goes through Sherfield Hill and a multi-junction on a Roman road south of Bramley.